Good evening and welcome to our March 31st Douglas County Board of County Commissioners business meeting. We want to welcome any of you who are at the Douglas County Courthouse or joining us online. I just want to pass on a bit of information regarding how we'll run our meetings on Zoom during this time of social distancing. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share the screen with the call. Participants will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet. All participants will be entered into the meeting with their audio muted, meaning the commission and the public will not be able to hear you. Presenters will be unmuted when their agenda item comes up. We ask that all online presenters use good conference call etiquette and mute their lines when they are not speaking and introduce themselves each time they speak. If you have a public comment on an agenda item or under regular public comment, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Staff will call on you and unmute you. We ask that speakers give their name and address for the minutes. The county reserves the right to shut off the microphone and remove a speaker from the meeting if they are vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. A recording of this meeting will be available on our website after the meeting. So we will start this evening with a proclamation for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And I believe that we do have someone here to discuss this. Shall I read the proclamation first? We'll have our presenter.
Yeah, and I would just ask Commissioner Portillo if I've not seen the presenter that we had in our list. Carol could do Blackwood on the list of attendees, but if she's listening, phone call, I see one. If she's here, raise her hand, please, and I'll keep an eye out.
Thank you, Jill. Whereas Sexual Assault Awareness Month calls attention to the fact that sexual trauma and abuse is widespread and impacts every person in this community. Whereas sexual assault and sexual harassment harm our community, and statistics show that 1 in 5 women and 1 in 67 men will be assaulted at some point in their lives, and that 2 out of 3 sexual assaults are never reported to police. Whereas child sexual abuse prevention must be a priority to confront the reality that 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 4 girls will experience sexual assault before the age 18. Whereas young people experience heightened rates of sexual violence, and youth ages 12 to 17 were 2.5 times as likely to be victims of rape or sexual assault. Whereas on campus, 1 in 5 women and 1 in 16 men are sexually assaulted during their time in college. Whereas this year's Sexual Assault Awareness Month is celebrating its 20th anniversary. The theme for this year's campaign is Consent is for Everyone. The campaign calls on partners and community members to help expand sexual assault prevention efforts and ensure the next generation fosters attitudes that promote consent, equality, and respect. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas hereby proclaim April 2021 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month in Douglas County. And we join advocates and communities across the country in taking action to prevent sexual trauma and abuse. We recognize April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month and feel each day of the year is an opportunity to create change for the future. Jill, have we seen our presenter?
No, I'm not seeing her. Again, if you are Carol, or if there's another representative for this proclamation that's in the attendees, please use the raise your hand function.
Do we take public comment on this item? Should we open it up for any public comment? Do we have any in the courthouse? Do we have any online?
We don't have any public comment for that item here.
Okay.
Same here.
Do we have any comments from our commissioners?
This is Commissioner Reed here. I'll make some comments. I was excited to see this on the agenda and was looking forward to seeing Carol or perhaps somebody else from the care center, but I'm sure they're busy with crisis calls in support of folks right now. That is where I started my own advocacy career as a volunteer. It used to be known as Gadugi Safe Center, and some folks still call it the Safe Center. And they have a long history in our organization. Both them and the Willow are the first of their centers in the state of Kansas. Were established here in Douglas County. And they just do really important work, including our a 24-hour hotline. They do hospital response and advocacy for survivors who need support through examinations, making police reports, court advocacy, and they also host a lot of really great support groups and do incredible education and awareness activities to really anybody who wants a presentation, whether it's at their job or at their organization. And even the school districts have been a really great partner for them in making sure that we do early education and awareness around sexual violence and what that looks like in our communities and in our families. So I love the work they do, and I'm excited that we get to bring some community awareness to it.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Reed, for those comments. Do we need a motion to adopt this proclamation? Nope, we can just proclaim it. Fantastic, then it is proclaimed. And we will move on to our consent agenda. Do any of the commissioners want to pull any items from our consent agenda?
No.
Sarah, do we have anyone in the courthouse who would like to pull any items from the consent agenda?
We don't have anyone to pull items from consent.
Jill, do we have anyone online to pull items from consent?
No,
May I have a motion to approve our consent agenda, please?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
I'll second that motion.
All of those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And we will open up for general public comment. Sarah, do we have anyone in the courthouse for general public comment?
We do not.
Jill, do we have anyone online for general public comment?
not seeing anyone.
Thank you. We will move to our regular agenda and item 4.1, Public Works. Consider approval for the 2021 Douglas County Noxious Weed Management Plan and the 2020 Annual Noxious Weed Eradication Progress Report. This is an item that was before us 2 weeks ago, and we had a lot of really great public input and a lot of really wonderful conversation from our staff. I really appreciate all of the continued input that we've had from folks in the interim 2 weeks. And I know that Chad has been fielding a lot of those conversations and hosting a lot of those conversations. So I'm excited to hear about the progress for this plan and continue that conversation tonight.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chad Voigt, Douglas County Public Works Director. And yes, 2 weeks ago, we had this item on your agenda and there was a lot of public comment received. And so what we've got here is an approach that we'd like to propose to develop a plan over the next several months that we would bring back in time so that this time next year, you know, everybody is on board and all the public interests have been addressed or heard. So what we've got is what I'm referring to as a vegetation management plan. We called it an operations plan a couple of weeks ago, but as I did a little research, it really made sense to do what's called an integrated plan that looks at things beyond the topic of herbicides, and it looks at everything related to vegetation management. So, you know, if we decide to change what we plant, or if we decide to change how we mow, that is related to herbicide use. So rather than have those discussions separately, it's a good maybe approach to pull all these together in one document. We've got some old documents that we have around that are sort of policies on mowing and you know, administrative documents basically. We've also got sort of some unwritten things that we do, and that's one of the keys here. Is I think a lot of things we do people would be happy with and they just don't know. And I think getting information out there about the efforts that we are making might, a lot of people would see those as positives. So I'll just walk you quickly through what I had in mind for this outline. You know, we have these sort of diverse areas that we manage, and I thought we should start the whole plan with a discussion of those areas because they're very different as you move from one task to another. If you're on the side of the road, it's very different than if you're in a park. or it's very different than if you're working for the city of Eudora on an agreement. So, and then it's also very different if you're entering private property to enforce noxious weed regulations. And so sort of outlining those sort of lays the groundwork for how we might build this plan, you know, relating back to those areas. And then, of course, stating a lot of goals. And I've tried to rough out some of the goals that I think reflect some of the comments we heard. They also reflect some of the tasks that we are obviously required to accomplish. So, and then we're always concerned about cost and public safety and employee safety. And so goal statements probably should be looking at all of those things. And then roadside vegetation is where we do most of our work. So that would be kind of the first really important category to jump into and look at how we manage the roadways, what we plant when we do projects, how we spray, what we spray, where we spray and when. And then moving on to the parks, we would have sections for each park. Lone Star Lake obviously gets a lot of attention. Wells Overlook is another park that is significant, so we'd have a section for that. I thought in both of those cases, it would make sense to update our park site plans. We don't really have an official site plan for the parks. We've got plenty of plans around, but they don't really define what we all see as the vision for the park. So, you know, that doesn't need to be a revisioning sort of thing. I mean, it could be, but it really would be putting on paper what we all agree is, you know, the assumed operations for those parks. And then moving on, we do have other county properties like the facility we're in here at Public Works. We've got native grass and we've got buffalo grass, and we try to do all of the, you know, environmentally responsible things in terms of keeping waste on site and recycling and those kind of things. And then we should obviously have a section on noxious weeds, and that's tonight what you're being asked to approve and sign is the noxious weed plan that goes to the state. That's required. The plan that we're envisioning here would basically have that as a section, and we can incorporate public comments and you know, the same comments that you've been hearing about the item tonight. And then herbicide application on other public entities' properties, you know, that's something that like the KDOT agreement was very formal. Some of the agreements with townships are very informal. I would think that if we want to set these goals for our own operations, that we would also want a statement that that's how we're going to conduct business on other agencies' properties also, kind of as a countywide view of the issue. And then I guess at the end, we would have a statement on an annual review, and each year, as we come back to sign our state plan, that we would review the annual vegetation management plan and hear any comments and updates as things change. So there's a lot of work here, and that's why at this point it's just an outline. I think it will take several months to develop, and I think in a few weeks we'd like to set some milestone dates for development so that we don't fall behind, and that by next winter it can be out there for public comment, and then we'll be ready to go this time next year. So I appreciated all the comments that we've gotten from the public. I think it's a good thing to be looking at. It's a good time to look at it. So this is really a good thing. So with that, I'll turn it over to questions.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that has gone into this, and that the idea of milestone dates, so we can show that we're continuing to move forward with this process and continuing to take that feedback into account as we make our plans throughout the year. So I appreciate all of that work, Chad. Commissioner Kelly, Commissioner Reed, any comments or questions?
Commissioner Reed here. Yeah, I want to echo Commissioner Portillo's comments and say that I am impressed with this, and I really appreciate how thoughtful and really broad view, integrated lens through which you all looked at this. Like you mentioned in the beginning, Chad, I think that's really smart. And I'm excited to see the progress on it. And I also think that's a really robust outline that you provided us in 2 weeks' time. So I just really appreciate the due diligence and hearing all of that feedback and really trying to incorporate that even in a first rough draft. So, and I also think that an annual review since we already have a routine schedule of this weed management plan going to the state, that's a good opportunity for us to stay in conversation about it. Oh, I did have one question actually that came up earlier today. Speaking of other public entities that we have agreements with, I knew about KDOT, and you mentioned that township agreements are kind of informal and varied. I wondered about the Corps of Engineers and State Parks and Wildlife, and if there were any agreements or if we were involved in any management out there, or if that land is completely managed by them and also perhaps has different requirements or regulations from the state that aren't really what you're working with in terms of all the other public spaces. Did that question make sense, Chad?
Yeah, it does. So I think that on the Corps of Engineers ground, we've been out there when in the past, we've actually had to call them and report noxious weeds on Corps ground around the lake. And their response was, well, thanks for letting us know. And we're kind of not in a position to deal with this. Can you help us out? And so we've done that. Now I think on the state park portions of Clinton Lake that, and at the Douglas County Fishing Lake, the KDWPT has their own policies and practices. And I don't believe that we've worked on their areas.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Yeah, I'd like the other commissioners, this Commissioner Kelly, appreciate all the work, appreciate you taking the time to visit with me about it over the phone and sort of brainstorm around here. It's a huge plan. I mean, you sort of mentioned that. Do you anticipate, what are the impacts on your staff and just on your work plan? Is this manageable with the team that you have, or are you thinking about that at all?
I am. We can manage getting this pulled together. The thing that's going to be an impact would be, potential changes to operations if some of the answers involve trading herbicides for labor and or cost, and so those are going to be where those discussions happen. But no, this plan, I met several times with Alan and Doug, and I've sort of frantically taken notes in those meetings, and there's a lot in their minds already that just needs to be in writing. So this really will pull together pretty easily. There's a lot to do, but we'll get a first draft out there fairly easily.
Thanks. And my second question, and you may not have an answer yet, and that's fine too, but I've got a lot of communication from folks wanting to be involved and be, part of and I note down there on that last item, seek public input. If you don't have a plan yet, that's just fine, just to tell folks there will be opportunities for a public input. But do you have anything you are thinking about that you might share with folks on that?
Well, that's a really good point, because on any issue, when we seek public feedback, whether it's a project or, anything, a lot of times we don't get a lot of response. So putting the word out right now in this format is great. I think anybody that has an interest in this issue, if they could get in touch with me by email or call the Public Works front desk, or at least get your name to us somehow, and then we will keep a running list of interested parties and stakeholders. And that's really the best way for us to be able to have an effective exchange with the public on it. That's a really good point to bring up, and I encourage anybody listening to get us your name and we'll put you on the list.
Thanks for that. Again, appreciate all the work, Chad. I know it was a quick turnaround time and maybe a little bit unexpected from us, so I appreciate it.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I'd like to open this up for public comment. Sarah, do we have anyone at the courthouse for public comment?
I believe we do. Jerry, did you want to speak? Sure. Come on up. If you could come sit there, I'll turn this around and they'll be able to see you.
Good evening, Commissioners.
You might need to speak up. Hey.
Good evening, commissioners.
Good evening.
Oh, they can hear you.
I do have a copy of the report that was provided for me by Robin, and thank you.
Jerry, can you introduce yourself for the?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Jerry McElhaney. I'm a resident of Douglas County, 580 North 400 Road down by Globe. And I do have a copy of the report that was provided to me for Robin, and I appreciate the visiting with each commissioner, and I appreciate your callbacks. That was very nice of you. And I also appreciate all the good work that Chad put together for this item. I really don't have many questions or public comment. I like the idea of some public input within this next year for the 2022 plan. I understand we have the 2020 plan in front of us and the proposal for the 2021 plan. And I would ask Chad or any commissioners, what are the major changes? What's the major changes from 2020 to 2021?
I'll take that. The 2020 plan is a report of our progress on noxious weed management that we send to the state. It's just a sort of a record keeping document. Whereas the 2021 is a state required document that outlines what we're going to do for the year. And there's really not a lot of difference between the 2021 plan that we want to sign now and the 2020 plan that we signed 12 months ago. So there, in terms of changes, there aren't really any significant changes. We're following state law and submitting those documents. So any pending changes would be in this new plan that we want to start working on.
And that's kind of the way I read it. And I wanted to make sure that there was nothing in the weeds, so to speak, that I was missing. So, and I do appreciate that very much. And I do appreciate that maybe getting a group of citizens and maybe officials in the county, like the local fire departments, the township fire departments. Of course, I know we'll have some interest. The Kansas Livestock Association will have some interest. The Kansas Farm Bureau definitely has interest. And the mowing and the maintaining of our right-of-ways and our ditches and our public ways in the county is so important for not only public safety, but for animal health safety. And it's also very important for the fire departments that if we have grass, overgrowth of grass in the right-of-way areas, it's very easy to catch on fire from the road, and then it spreads onto private property. So we have that consideration also. But again, thank you for all your guys' help. The return of the phone calls and the plan here in front of me, and I can see there's a lot of hard work and care that went into it, and that's most appreciated. Okay.
This is Commissioner Portillo. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Sarah, do we have anyone else at the courthouse?
I don't believe we have anyone else for this item.
Thank you. Jill, do we have anyone online for this item?
I'm not seeing any hands raised, but if anyone is interested in providing public comment online for this item, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Commissioners, I'm not seeing anyone. Yep.
Thank you. We will go ahead and close public comment. Any additional discussion by commissioners?
Thanks for coming in, Jerry. See ya.
No.
Okay, then I believe that we need a motion. I feel like you both unmuted, so someone was going to start, but I can go ahead and start if neither of you are starting.
Here I am. I thought I already had it in a tab, but it's Commissioner Reed here. I move to approve the 2021 Douglas County Noxious Weed Management Plan and the 2020 Annual Noxious Weed Eradication Progress Report, and direct staff to develop a vegetation management plan prior to the 2022 weed control season.
Second.
I'll bring that to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Hi.
Thank you. And thank you again, Chad, for all of your really hard work on this. We appreciate it.
Thank you, commissioners. Have a good night.
You too.
We will move to item 4.2, discussion of a 5-member county commission. Sarah, I believe we have a presenter for this item.
Yes, thank you, commissioners. Our county clerk, Jamie Shu, is moving into the webinar to help lead us through this presentation. I'm going to be running the PowerPoint for him. So in a minute here, I'm going to share my screen and let me make sure you all have this. All right. Jamie, the floor is yours.
Good evening, commissioners. Can you hear me?
You can. Thank you, Jamie.
Great. So Sarah asked that I kind of pull together the laws about member districts, and I tried to put it in a way that outlined how the process worked, and especially if it were to happen this year versus other years. So the first thing we want to do is kind of tell you any commission district can be 3, 5, or 7. And currently on the next slide shows kind of where the counties sit right now. 88 of the 105 counties have 3-member commissions. 15 counties have 5 commissioners. And as you can tell by that list, it's a pretty broad range of size of county. Medium, small, large, like Sedgwick. And then Johnson has 7 commissioners. Wyandotte has 10, but the important thing to know about Wyandotte is they are a combined city-county government. So to me, they're a little different in how they're kind of made up. So on the next slide, so what does it take to create an action to increase the commission size? Well, the first thing is you as a commission can pass a resolution to put it on the next general election ballot. The other thing is you can have a petition that is submitted to you, which compels you to put the question on the next general election ballot. The petition has to be signed by not less than 5% of the qualified electors, which as it currently stands would be about 3,900 valid signatures would be needed to compel you to do the resolution. The resolution must be in more than 60 days from a general election. So what that means is whether you pass a resolution or you get a petition to put a resolution on the general election, it needs to be done before September 1st of any given year. So that's how it kind of gets on the ballot. Once it's on the ballot, if it passes, then before January 1st, after the election, then the Board of Commissioners will adopt a resolution that outlines the new districts. I spoke to Leavenworth is probably the most recent county that has done this. They did do, when they were doing the election, kind of some, here's what maps may look like, but that's not required by law. It was kind of more of just kind of helping the public see this is what a map may look like. But once it passes, then you have by January 1st to actually approve a map. And that comes from the sitting commission at the time. If you do not act, then the chief judge of the district court will basically order the districts by January 31st. Once you've adopted your resolution, the governor then within 5 days will declare whether you're going to have a special election or whether you're going to have an election at the next general election. And we'll kind of talk about that here in a second. But and one of the things it says in there is with advice from the board. So the way I understand it is when this has happened before, the sitting governor at the time kind of talks to the county commission to say, would you prefer a special election or would you prefer to hold off until the next general election? in order to elect the new members, all right? If you call a special election, it has to be held 75 to 90 days from the date of your board resolution. If you call a special election, then what happens is the chairs of each one of the recognized political parties calls a convention, not less than 15 days or more than 25 days from the governor's declaration, and they will choose a candidate that will be on the ballot. If there's somebody that wants to be on the ballot as an independent, they have from 25 days of the governor's declaration to submit a petition of not less than 5% of the qualified electors in the new district. Candidates must reside in the new district, and then only voters in the new district will vote in the special election. And I've had that question been brought up since we've talked about it. So all voters in Douglas County will vote on whether we would increase from 3 to 5. But when the special election or the general election happens, only the voters in the new district get to select their new commissioner. The winners in the special election will only serve until the next general election when their successors are chosen. And we'll talk about that timeline here in a second. So as you know, your terms of office are staggered right now, so that no more than a majority is elected in one election. So Commission District 1 is elected in an off year from 2 and 3. So you would have 2 new commission districts. You would have District 4 and District 5, and they will be elected in the same cycle as District 1. If there is a special election and it results in the next election having, so basically, we'll look at the calendar, but if you have 4 and 5 and they have a special election and it is not their election that's coming up in the next general election, then they would stand for election for a 2-year term and then do a 4-year term. All right. So this is what it looks like. Let's say you did it this year. Prior to September 1st of this year, you would either decide to place the question on a ballot, or you would have a petition that compels you to put it on the ballot. The question would be on the ballot on November 2nd, and it is a majority that decides it. So it doesn't have to be like a 2/3 or something in other states. So +1 vote. Then prior to January 1st of 2022, you'd adopt the new districts. Then the governor either calls a special election or declares for a general election. If it's a special election, then like we talked about, the political parties will call a convention, choose candidates. Independent candidates will submit a petition. We would hold a special election 75 to 90 days from the declaration. And then the winners would serve until January 10th of 2023. And the way it kind of works is because the next election is the 1st district, the 4th and 5th would actually be standing for election for a full 4-year term, because that would be their term. So you would have someone run in a special election, and then we would have people file on June 1st for the 4th and the 5th. They would be elected in November, and then they would serve a 4-year term. If you decide to wait to the general election along with the governor, then basically what would happen is June 1st, you would have filings for the 1st, 4th, and 5th districts. There would be election on November 8th, and those 3 individuals would take office on January 10th of 2023. So it kind of works out that the 1st is the next general election. If for some reason this decision was held past this next year, so it would, and one thing to know is that this question can only be on a general election ballot. You can't run a mail ballot election, and you can't do it during a primary. So the next election would be November of 2022 or later. Then the 4th and 5th district commissioners who are elected by special or general election would only serve their term through 2025. And then you would select commissioners in 2024, and they would start a 4-year term in 2026. First of all, it seems crazy to say the words 2026, but does that part make sense? Because I tried to make it sound as clear as possible. So that kind of outlines how the process works, and it also outlines kind of in a calendar what that would look like if it happened this year or if it happened after this year. So what questions do you have?
This is Commissioner Portillo. Thank you so much for that presentation, Jamie. It was very helpful. I do have a couple of questions. You mentioned that Leavenworth was the county that most recently went through this process.
Yes.
First, do you happen to know if this went onto the ballot because of a petition, or did the county commission make a resolution? And either way, could you help us understand the pros and cons of the petition versus resolution process?
Well, if I believe that it was citizen initiated. I don't know if it was where the citizens came to the commission and convinced them to just do it by resolution, or if it was by petition. So I'm not familiar, but I know it was citizen initiated.
Thanks. And then all of the calendar pieces did get kind of scary with how many years out we start talking. 2026 sounds really far away, and I know it's not. But it also sounds like if we were to move this process forward, and this was on the ballot in November of 2021, it would kind of make the most sense to just let this be a part of the 2022 election rather than running a completely separate special election, because that special election seems like it'd be a lot of work for a very short period of time.
Yes, and the one thing to know is that the county would bear the cost of a special election. So if you had it as a special election, that would be one extra election that we would have, that there would be an extra cost to.
Thank you.
But I think it would also involve whatever the citizens kind of have that conversation about, if they want to have those seated for those few months or not.
You mentioned that we don't have to have potential maps before the election, but we certainly could provide those as informational purposes. I know we wouldn't be kind of voting on any maps until after an election to increase the size, but would it be possible for us to share potential maps with citizens before any election about the potential increase in size?
Yes, it would be. And, the timelines are pretty tight. And so to me, this is just me speaking, you would want to have potential maps, because if the election is November 2nd, the canvass won't happen for 2 weeks after that. So you're in the middle of November and you have to make a decision on maps by January 1. And of course, there's a holiday in there. You have a limited number of weeks to draw a map, get public comment, and then kind of choose a map. And so I think having the maps be part of that conversation makes your job a little easier.
Thank you. Those are all of my questions. I open this up for questions from commissioners.
Jamie, this is Commissioner Kelly. Thanks for the presentation. I thought you did a really good job of making it clear, so thank you. If I'm not mistaken, we need to redistrict as well. And I was wondering if you could sort of give us an outline of that. I mean, we're going to be doing new maps anyways. Where does that fit into all of this as well?
Well, I don't know if you've followed that the Census Bureau has kind of pushed back the numbers. And so what normally would happen is right about now, new numbers would come out and we'd start having a conversation about that redistricting, because you would like to do it with enough time that people can then file for office in the new districts and that type of stuff. What we've been told is that the census numbers won't come out until the fall. For us, it still gives us plenty of time. For the legislature, it's a little closer. But so what will happen is that the census numbers will come out. Our GIS department will kind of put those into the layers, and then we'll apply them to the current commission districts to see if they're off, which I can tell you they are. Then we would start, what we have done before, and you guys can do it differently, is then GIS in our office kind of work on maps that would make the districts equal, and then present those maps to the commission to kind of choose from and talk about.
Jamie, when do you normally have those draft new maps before the commission? Like if that's working on in the fall of 2021, when would you bring those back before the commission?
Well, we usually fall of the year before the redistricting is when we've done it. If we don't get those numbers until fall, spring, September or October, the goal would still be to try to have those redistricting maps by the 1st of 2022. Because then you have, so the filing deadline is June 1st. So that gives you enough time for candidates to make decisions, that type of stuff.
So
You guys probably already know this part, but the third is the one that has quite a few more. They've gained quite a bit. So I think the shift is going to be a little more substantial than it was 10 years ago.
So if we follow that timeline, whether we go to 5 or not, or whether we put it on the ballot or not, we will be changing districts by January 1st, 2022 is sort of along your timeline. Is that correct?
They would go into effect in the election of 22. So it'd be 23.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Reed here. Thanks, Jamie. That was really helpful to read through in the packet before, and I appreciate you putting all that together and kind of the different timeline variables. I wonder with districting, if you could you help elaborate a little bit on kind of what are the factors in redistricting? I mean, I think population numbers is really what it's about. Am I right on that? Are there other factors that are particularly considered? Or is it really just about the density of population as it's spread out around the county?
So there's certain rules in redistricting. They have to be contiguous. So you can't have a district with spots around the county. So they have to connect. What the Supreme Court has really upheld is they also need to be compact. So they need to not have, of course, we've all seen gerrymandering, but need to be compact, need to be contiguous, need to be as equal in size as they can be. And then they need to follow the census blocks. So precincts are built out of census blocks. And so we try to keep it within precinct lines, largely because that just makes it a lot easier for ballots. But also there's a rule that you can't split up townships, as far as there's certain parts that ways you can't split up a township. So those are kind of the rules that you use. Yeah, so that's kind of the guidelines you have. Okay,
that's helpful. Thank you. When you say can't split up townships, can you help me understand? My Wakarusa Township is in both District 2 and 3, as an example, correct? Without getting distracted by my map. And so I'm just curious. Now I'm just curious about that.
Well, Wakarusa is unique because it's been split by the city of Lawrence. So you have North Wakarusa, East Wakarusa, West Wakarusa. I mean, you really, you could not have a contiguous and compact district that really included all of the Wakarusas. So those guidelines as far as contiguous, compact, and so forth are, you do your best to do that.
Got it. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. I don't have any other questions, I don't believe.
If we don't have additional questions, this is Commissioner Portillo. If we don't have additional questions from commissioners at this time, we'll open this item up to public comment. Sarah, do we have anyone at the courthouse for public comment?
Yes, we do.
Hi, Commissioners. My name's Casey Simino. I'm the mayor of Baldwin City. And I just want to start off by, one, thanking each of you for taking up this topic and discussing it. I think it's an important discussion that we should have as a county. We've had a lot of growth in the last 10, 20 years in Douglas County. And I think that's kind of led us down this path to have this discussion. Just a couple notes that I made as I was doing a little bit of research on my off time is, you know, the way I think of government is, you know, the more local we get, you always hope that the more representation you can have for a population. Obviously, that doesn't always happen. You have larger communities, you have smaller communities, different things like that. But I'm in very much in support of this idea because I think that, you know, a population of close to plus or minus 120,000 people in Douglas County actually gives the community less representation than at the state level, where we currently sit with commissioners. And your jobs are part-time, just like on the city level. So the other reasons I like it, you know, gives more time for you commissioners with having a job, a full-time job, and serving our community to get out to your population that you represent. You know, right now with the level of citizens that you guys represent each individually, it's virtually impossible to be able to get out and talk to that many people, that many communities. So I just think that kind of brings that collaboration a little bit closer for each of you. Another thing I just thought of and jotted down was, you know, right now with 3 commissioners, 2 you can't collaborate by the meetings. You know, you just have ideas, discussions, you know, want to bounce things off of each other. I know that, you know, that often happens in city councils where you have 5 members, you can call one other member and kind of bounce an idea off of each other. And I think that's important. I think that brings about discussion that oftentimes can't come, and you can talk through different perspectives and different ideas. So that was another thought. You know, and again, my last thought was just, you know, more representation always allows for more ideas, different perspectives, just different experiences inserted into every meeting. And I think that's, you know, as a diverse a community as Douglas County is, and we're proud of that, I think that's important to be able to insert as many ideas and different philosophies, different perspectives into those discussions as we talk about our county government on a high level. So again, I truly appreciate you guys bringing this to the county commission, having the discussion. Jamie, thank you for all the information. It was very helpful on my end as well. And I want to thank, you know, Sarah for all her help with our city administrator, Glenn Rodden. I know they collaborate a lot and discuss a lot. And Commissioner Reed, thank you for all the phone calls and the meetings and the pestering and questions and all that. We truly appreciate it. We've always appreciated all the county support and help in Baldwin City. So again, I just want to say thank you guys for discussing this item on your agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. We really appreciate the comments. Sarah, do we have anyone else at the courthouse for public comment?
I don't believe we do.
Jill, do we have anyone online for public comment on this item?
Yes, I'm gonna go to John Nelbandian first. Go ahead, Dr. Nelbandian.
Hello, can you all hear me?
We can, John, thank you.
Oh, awesome. Okay, thank you all very much. John Nelbandian, And you may know that the city has engaged a task force, which I am chairing, which is looking at various aspects of form of government. We're maintaining the basics of our council manager form, but one of the things that we're going to be looking at is not only sort of a directly elected mayor and terms in office, but we're also going to be looking at the possibility of district elections. And I have a question for Jamie. He and I have corresponded on this. Jamie, I want to know the GIS system, what kind of data is included is available through the GIS system, is especially when we're considering issues of equity. And so are things like average income levels, is that considered? Are demographics, race, age, stuff like that? Is that all in the GIS system?
Well, there's two parts of that. The first is we use census data. We could get any of the census block data. And as you know, census block data does have quite a bit of demographics in it. Historically, you only use numbers. So we have not done it where we use the demographic information from the census block data. It is just sheerly numbers.
You mean you do districts based on numbers of people? That's all?
Correct. That's what's required by law.
That's ridiculous. I mean, Shannon's smiling because she knows what I'm talking about.
Well, John, I will just say though, most of the time when we know from the research that districts actually and local government elections tend to lead to more representation of minoritized communities. And that happens because people with minoritized backgrounds tend to live in close proximity to each other. This can be overlaid by income, race, ethnicity. There are lots of different reasons.
Got it.
Redlining and historical policies being a big part of that. But what we tend to see in the research is districts or not resulting in more or less representation. At the county level, we already have districts. And so we're not looking at kind of whether to have districts or not. I think for the city, questions around representation and going to a district model or not are really important from an equity perspective. From the county level, our districts have to be contiguous. And that necessarily is going to mean that we probably won't have balanced districts demographically because of historical housing patterns, but having districts tends to result in more representation of people with minoritized identities than not having districts at all.
Yeah, but if all we're doing is creating districts in the city by population, that is not going to help us that much. I mean, we need to know things like average income levels of areas of town or things like that. Is that data available, Jamie?
Those data are certainly available because we have those data by census blocks.
So Jamie, can we actually access that data?
Yeah, that is data that can be accessed because it's used for quite a bit of other things. And the city GIS probably already has it.
So
and those are publicly available data.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so anyone can access that. That's not, I mean, the folks at both the city and the county GIS departments have a lot of expertise. And I think that piece is really important in analyzing these data, but those are publicly available data to anyone.
Oh, I see. So we could just utilize our own city staff and they would have access to census information. And okay. Oh, that really simplifies things for us. Okay, I understand that. All right, thank you all. Thank you all very much. That's very helpful. Thanks, Shannon. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, John. Jill, do we have anyone else for online public comment?
I believe we've moved
Chris
Mr.
Flowers, I'm sorry. I didn't unmute myself, but I unmuted you, Chris. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Chris Flowers, and I'm kind of against this. From what I read in the paper, it sounded there's concerns because currently no commissioner is from outside of Lawrence, I guess, and there's talk about representation of non-Lawrence. But I would say before this commission, Lawrence had been underrepresented because last commission was 2/3 of people not living in Lawrence. And if Lawrence makes up 80% of the population, then it just seems kind of, I don't see the need for this if we're concerned about the rural not getting their representation, because what's going to happen in the end is if Lawrence represents 80% of the population, then doesn't that mean 4 out of the 5 districts need to be Lawrence, and then the other districts not Lawrence? I mean, that's the only way you're going to ensure someone not from Lawrence being on the board. But what good is it for them if you're basically just making it so they'll only be 1/5 of the board from now on? So if this is being done to help the people not living in Lawrence get representation, I think in the long run it's going to hurt them, because it's going to ensure they're always a minority. They're never going to have like 3 out of the 5 seats, and unless you don't district it that way so that there's at least 3 districts where people from Lawrence aren't living in. But I mean, if they only represent 20% of the population, I don't see how it's going to happen with the math. And also, the other concern about this is that what's going to be the added cost of 2 extra commissioners? I mean, you guys aren't necessarily cheap. I mean, maybe in the long run because you're not full time, but still that's going to add up. And I'm for representation, but this just seems like we could be wasting money. And if anything, I mean, the city's talking about looking how they redo their government. I personally think they should be looking to collaborate with you guys and seeing if maybe we should look at combining maybe county and city. I mean, just because if they expand their government also, that's just a lot more politicians we're going to be paying. So if we combine the two, at least we could expand the districts, but keep the number of politicians we're creating new jobs for down a bit. But that's just some of my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Jill, do we have anyone else for public comment on this item?
Yes, George Huntsinger, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can. You go ahead.
Good evening, commissioners. Pat, Sarah, good to see you guys again. Sorry to say I've not met the 2 commissioners yet. Farm Beer, usually we get together with you guys, and thanks to COVID, that's not been possible, but congratulations on your election and welcome to the County Commission. Jamie, thank you for all your hard work. I know you and me have just talked about things on the phone a little bit, and you've put a real good presentation together. I just want to echo on what Casey said. On behalf of Farm Beer and the rural people, we farm out south of Lawrence as well, and I just think this is a very important topic. I really think we need to go to 5 commissioners. On my take of it is, look at Lawrence. We've expanded south, we've expanded west. We're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And when you have counties like Miami and Franklin that are smaller and they're running 5 commissioners, I think it's time for Douglas County to expand too. The towns growed, the counties growed, and I think it makes just good sense to have good representation, especially in the rural, especially in the city, just all around. I think it's a good thing. That's all I want to just make a quick comment, and thank you guys for taking this in consideration. I got a lot of positive feedback from you guys this evening on your thoughts about this. If you want to blame anybody, I guess I'm the one that kind of got this ball started, but I got to give a shout out to Baldwin and Eudora and Lecompton mayors. They've taken this and visited with Sarah and ran with it. So anyway, thank you for all your hard work, and look forward to seeing some maps maybe and this becoming reality.
Thank you, George. Jill, do we have anyone else for public comment?
I'm not seeing anyone.
Okay, we will bring this back to commissioners for discussion. I really appreciate the presentation, Jamie, and the comments from the Mayor of Baldwin, from John, from Chris, from George. I appreciate all of this feedback. I see quite a few issues, and I think that we tend to talk about this discussion in terms of representation from a rural Lawrence divide. And I would encourage us to really hear out the Mayor of Baldwin and think about representation in another way. Currently, each commissioner in Douglas County represents a district that's larger than most state representatives. So just the sheer number of people that we are representing is pretty significant. So part of the expansion provides the possibility of election from folks from the rural area. I do think it's important to point out that any way that we would create maps with 5 districts, people from Lawrence are going to live in every one of those 5 districts because people from Lawrence make up 80% of our population. So it would be nearly impossible to create a Lawrence-free map for a Douglas County Commission district. So there is the possibility of having a complete 5-person Lawrence County Commission. It may be less likely because we would have districts that might have larger rural populations than our current districts do. But I think that we need to think about that question of representation, not just as a rural urban one, but one where we can have districts that are a bit more compact so that we have the chance for more variety and more diversity in our representation, which may include a rural piece of that. There is no question that there would be an increased cost if we go to 5 commissioners because we would have 2 additional commissioner salaries. We would have to do some remodeling in our beautiful courthouse to make sure that we can all fit in our rooms when we actually get back to having meetings in person. But there's also the possibility of commissioners being able to talk to each other outside of public meetings. And so that idea of commissioners being able to call each other and have a conversation. Right now, because we are a 3-person commission, any 2 of us having a conversation has to be an open meeting because we would constitute a majority. I think that the process question is really interesting. We've heard kind of conversations around this since, I would say, even before we had a majority Shannon election this past year. So I would be interested to hear more from folks about kind of the petition or resolution. How are we seeing this? How are we really gauging interest from the community around, do we want to move forward with this election? And what would that timeline look like? But I really appreciate all of the thoughts and input and open this up for discussion with my fellow commissioners.
This is Commissioner Reed here. Yeah, I've been excited to have this conversation. It came up a handful of times throughout the election through different phone conversations I was having with voters, some emails I received, and from various parts of the county. And so what I'm really interested in, I'm really grateful to the folks that showed up and gave some public comment today, and I really want to hear more thoughts. I think it's such a kind of interesting and layered issue for all the reasons that Commissioner Portillo just sort of detailed and what the considerations of it are. And I'm really interested to hear some public input and trying, throughout this conversation tonight, think through what does that look like? What are some strategies to seek more public input, perhaps outside of just our commission meetings and people who are showing up to give us comment here, interest surveys. I'm curious to, from folks who have been interested in this conversation and wanting to promote the idea of it, what their thoughts are. So, George and the Mayor Baldwin, Casey, I would be interested to hear more from them about some opportunities to gauge more public input in that way. And I think that, the numbers of it are really interesting. I had never really considered the number of people that each elected official was representing when it comes to districts until running for public office and paying attention to all those numbers and precinct numbers and district lines and paying more attention to that, and just was kind of blown away to realize that each county commissioner represents approximately 40,000 people. And what does that look like in terms of accessibility of elected officials to constituents, and what does it also look like for our budget? And obviously there is a cost associated with that. But I just think it sounds to me, this is not a conversation that I have been privy to prior to deciding to run for public office. So prior to the last year, it was not a question that I had heard raised before. And so it makes me curious to have more conversations. And this is something I haven't thought to ask Sarah previous to now, but curious if the conversation has ever come before the commission before, or Jamie, if you have any recollection of that, if it's come before the commission in a formal way or been a topic of conversation, at least in your time here.
This is Sarah. I don't remember a formal discussion about it in my 10 years here. Jamie, you've been here a little bit longer.
There's been informal conversations. Every now and then I've had a commissioner who said, what's the process? What's that kind of look like? But it's never been a more formal discussion. It's been kind of, here's a question, how would that work? And I get that from citizens. It's come up every now and then from citizens also.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I don't have any questions other than that. I'm just kind of chewing on the idea of it being a resolution of the county commission versus a petition and process, and what, a petition process is a real way to gauge citizen interest. But as you mentioned earlier with Leavenworth, and I know we don't know exactly what that process looked like, that perhaps it was citizen initiated, it came to the commission and sort of compelled the commission. Those are just my thoughts about that, and kind of chewing on what the pros and cons of those different options or routes are.
Well, and this is Commissioner Portillo. Sarah, do we have a way to do, not a full survey, but kind of an informational survey or inquiry on our website, some way that we can collect information from citizens to see what level of interest we would have? So kind of trying to thread that needle and not asking citizens to do the hard work of running a petition, but having some sort of mechanism for us to have more public feedback.
Commissioners, this is Sarah Plinsky. Yes, we could certainly put something on our website that encourages people to, let us know, and put information in our Douglas County newsletter. And, maybe our friends at the local media outlets will help us in getting that word out as to that if folks are interested in this, that they could certainly pass those words along to us, and then, evaluate that at some point in time here in the future, according to the timelines put forward by Jamie. That's definitely something we could do. And that was going to be part of my question to the commission, is how would you like to gauge feedback on this initiative? So I think we could put together a small little, I'm going to use air quotes, communications plan as to how to at least be open and solicit feedback on this topic, maybe with a little bit of information from Jamie's presentation as to some, common questions that might come about.
Commissioner Kelly, I don't have a whole lot to add. I think the other two commissioners have elevated most of the thoughts around this that I think I do think it's important to get some maps out there as a sort of an educational point to Commissioner Portillo's point about how we think about representation. I don't want, I hope that people won't give us feedback without a little more information. We need a little more information about what those look like, because I think sometimes we connect dots that maybe not on purpose, but maybe incorrectly, that I think if we had a little more information about what these districts might look like, we could have some good conversations. I do pause a little bit on the idea of a survey, only from my experience working with the school district that does lots of surveying. And I think sometimes we have to be thoughtful about what our expectation is when we survey. What we have to tell people, like, what will we do with that? Because that sort of looks like a vote, and I don't want to give that impression. So if we are gonna survey, I see Commissioner Portillo shaking her head. That's not what I meant, and I get that, and I appreciate that, and I think we just have to be, how we get that input would be really, I do like sort of, it's hard right now, public forums and just hearing people think out loud and sort of walk through and hear other people's impressions. So I don't know the answers. I don't know that any of us do, but it's just something I want to think about and be really thoughtful about how we gather that information, and then how we make a decision whether is it better to go with that petition, is it better for us to make a resolution, or no action is also an option. So just those are the thoughts that are on my mind.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I was definitely not thinking about a survey in terms of a vote, but much more in a information gathering. We are still in the midst of a global pandemic. And so the idea of relying on a citizen-driven petition does worry me. I hope that folks aren't gathering in large groups. I hope that folks are not kind of engaging more than they need to in face-to-face spaces. So asking folks to gather a lot of signatures can be, I think, a big ask in our current climate. And so I'm hoping that there are alternative methods for us to get input from the public if they're interested in seeing this on a ballot, because we know that we can run elections in a really healthy and safe way. And so do we have the level of kind of push from our communities to move this forward? And I think it would purely be, one, from an educational perspective, because I think gathering information can also be about sharing information. So sharing information with constituents about representation, cost, timeline, what those maps would look like, and then gather information on what does the public expect of us, and do they want to see this moved forward, or do they want to see no action? My understanding is if there is that petition, then really it's not up to us. They would go on the ballot. So it's really about what role do we play in gathering that information.
Commissioners, this is Sarah. I'd like to just interject on a point that I've heard both from Commissioner Kelly and Commissioner Portillo about the maps. I guess I want to talk through that process with Jamie, because we won't have current census data for those maps. If you're trying to get a picture of what that would look like before September 1st, when you would need to decide if you're putting it on the ballot. So if you're looking to sort of advertise, hey, this is sort of how we think the districts are going to come about, I guess I wanted to talk through that a bit logistically with Jamie. And then honestly, as we have a lot of community members listening in on this process, please understanding that those would be approximations that would happen after, frankly, a pretty tight timeline between a November election and then when those maps would need to be certified in order to help people prepare for running for election, assuming we weren't, even if we were looking to do a general election and for those districts in 2022. And I don't know, Jamie, if you have any thoughts about that process. I just know that the process of redistricting is not just a few button pushes. It's quite an involved process.
Well, I think you're right. You could do some potential maps knowing that that data would change. we could see what the most recent census data, because you can get basically census projection data, it just wouldn't be official. And whether we could get that in census blocks so we could do the layers. I think you could come up with something recognizing that we don't know what the official number is going to look like. I think that's the concern a lot of people have right now because of COVID, what the census numbers look like. And that was one thing when I talked to the county clerk in Leavenworth County was they had to be really clear during that election was these maps we're showing doesn't necessarily mean that's the map. This is just kind of a guideline. But she did say that it was really helpful to kind of have, they had a couple options that they kind of put out there that's what this could look like. So it gave them some starting points. So yes, you could do some right now, just recognizing those numbers may be off from what we would see in September. And I also know that there's a push from a number of states to try to get the Census Bureau to move that date up. So, you know, hopefully September is not that. And if I can, I actually just asked the county clerk in Leavenworth County. She said it was a petition that brought it to their commission to resolution.
This is Commissioner Portillo. Thank you very much, Jamie. I really appreciate all that information. And I do think that the potential maps, even if they would be based on projected census data, and even if we had a few options, would help folks visualize what 5 districts would look like, because I think that that would really help us frame that conversation, since this conversation has been framed in a very kind of rural Lawrence divide. The Journal World picture on this is pretty stark when you look at kind of that separation between the courthouse and rural areas. And I really want to help folks understand that no matter what, these districts are going to be made up of our entire Douglas County community. And that means that Lawrence will be a part of almost all of them, pretty much all of them, no matter how we slice it. So I think that it would be an important visualization as part of this ongoing conversation.
Sarah, this is Commissioner Kelly. I like what you said about a air quotes communication plan. I think that I would be interested in sort of, it's not like unfortunately, we didn't just come upon this pandemic, we're a year into it. And I'd be interested in sort of what best practices we've seen for civically engaging, especially with our equity lens. I want to make sure we're not leaving certain members of our community out of that discussion. You know, that's one of my fears about going to online surveys and those types of things. I want to make sure that we're being thoughtful about how we communicate. I'm not saying we wouldn't be, but I just think it'd be interesting to hear from other communities, like what have we seen that's been really successful in engaging communities around, you know, difficult conversations and during a pandemic. It seems like just my initial reaction is like we're defaulting to a lot of online communication, and I just want to think about, is there other ways of doing that we can get information safely? I appreciate what Commissioner Portillo said. I think it's really important to recognize that we're in a pandemic, and that it's not safe to gather in large groups, and yet we want to get lots of discussion going around this so that we can have a good dialogue and make good decisions.
This is Sarah. Yeah, Commissioner Kelly, I'd like to take that back to staff and have some more conversations as to what we could bring you as some ideas, maybe do a little research ourselves in conversation with how things have happened, you know, in the last year or so in terms of that outreach. And so I'd like to take that back as staff and sort of put some outlines to that, and then get the commissioners' feedback and reactions to, is this kind of what you're thinking? No, you want something way more than that. I mean, obviously we can mail a letter to every home in Douglas County if that's what we chose to do. You know, so there's lots of different types of outreach that we can do. I'd also, I guess, as we think about our timeline and bringing this back, I'd also just, you know, defer to Jamie here in this conversation in terms of putting together like some of those broad outlines of what those maps would be like, and how much time do we think as staff we need to flesh this out a little bit more, and then bring something back to the commission for review. What do you think, Jamie? I mean, I'm thinking we're beginning to approach budget season. Life is getting a little busier here, and yes, we still have a global pandemic. So I'd like some time to make sure we could do this right. I'd like at least 30 days, perhaps a little longer, to sort of bring some, if the commission's comfortable with that, to bring something back before them to consider.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I'm comfortable with the 30-day turnaround as far as like communication strategy. It sounds like we have until September 1st to decide whether this goes on the November ballot. So that still gives us the summer to really engage in those conversations with the community.
Jamie, do you feel comfortable that we could have some broad maps in 30 to 45 days or so?
Yes, our GIS department's really good, and Bryce is already we've talked about how it would look like. So not what the maps are, but I think he's already started thinking about how he would build some. So yes.
Well, I think that's great, commissioners. Then I think we as staff can take that back and kind of develop some broad outlines for our communication strategy and some maps, and then bring back before the commission for your review, and then push it out to the community.
Commissioner Portillo, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. This is information and discussion only, so we have no further action we need to take as a commission. We really appreciate the input, Jamie, the input from the community, and next steps, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move on to item 4.3, update on Senate Bill 13 as amended by the House and sent to the governor. Sarah?
Thank you, commissioners, and perhaps before my friends in Baldwin leave, Senate Bill 13, one of the reasons why we put it on this agenda was it does impact notification of all units of government inside Douglas County, and those timelines will change for this budget year. So you might want to stay and hear a little bit of this presentation if you have time. If not, you can pull it up later. I want to turn it over to Jamie to talk through what has changed with this legislation and what we can anticipate happening this year and then in future years in terms of how Senate Bill 13 will change our budget and notification processes.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. First of all, in late breaking news, the governor signed Senate Bill 13 today. So what we're talking about is actually now law. I would like to tell you, well, a little bit of back story. There's a group of us, when we rebuilt the finance system, that's a finance steering committee, and we meet regularly and talk about a number of processes and stuff. And so I drew up these notes for that committee, and we met last week. So these aren't as clean as I probably would have had. Just want to share that they're probably a little more jumbled, but so basically what this does is this replaces the tax lid legislation that happened a few years ago. And what it does is it puts in a notification system based off of what is considered a revenue neutral calculation. So starting this year, so this goes into effect now, starting this year, the county clerk will calculate revenue neutral for each taxing subdivision before June 1st. And the way that revenue neutral will be calculated is, and these numbers are just, I'm throwing these around, is let's say a taxing unit had a mill levy of 6 and it got them $1 million in revenue last year. When the assessed values come out from the appraiser, then we would take that assessment for that taxing unit, divide $1 million, and figure out what the mill would be to get $1 million based off the assessment. So the mill could go down because, maybe as assessment went up. Then when that happens is we would then notify each one of the taxing units. And that's everything from a drainage district to a city to a township. School districts currently are in this legislation, but I have heard that they're trying to maybe not be, but they are currently in it. So honor before, we would send them that, and then honor before July 15th. So there's a 1 month deadline. Each taxing unit would then tell us whether they're going to exceed the revenue neutral rate, and there needs to be a hearing about it. Then there needs to be a notice to the taxpayer that tells them a whole bunch of information. Now, the first thing to know is the first year this is in effect, we don't send out the notice to the taxpayer, we just do the public notice. Starting next year, there would be a notice sent to the taxpayer that would have a number of things on it. It would show them, and this is for each taxing subdivision, and the good thing is we were allowed to put it into one document. They would get basically a tax statement that says, this is what the revenue neutral rate is for this entity. This is their proposed tax revenue to get their budget. And it's going to show a number of things like what the appraised value is, what assessed value is. So it's kind of like what's on the tax statement. Then there's some calculations that we would have to figure out how to do to go into the notice that shows, so if it stayed revenue neutral, this is what your taxes would look like for revenue neutral. If the hearing approves the change, this is what your taxes are going to look like with the change. And here is the difference. So this is how much your taxes are going to go up. And all of that goes into one notice. There's lots of things that are there for us to kind of figure out because, the other part of that is the state of Kansas is not considered a taxing unit under this, but we still have to put in what their mills are. But we don't have to show how their changes affect things. We don't know what that notice really looks like. And luckily we have a year to kind of figure that out because, for me, usability is a big thing. And if, this could be a multi-page document with all kinds of numbers that if most people that would open it and go, I have no clue what this is, right? So I think we'd have to design it in a way that's really kind of, it's easy to figure out, but for staff wise, making this kind of automated so that we get it on the notices with all the calculations and stuff. So then that needs to be sent out. And then there needs to be a public hearing held between August 10th and September 10th, just like you would for a budget, but this would specifically talk about the increase on the revenue neutral. And then a majority vote of the governing body approves it. And so you can't violate it. So whatever you whatever that taxing unit tells us on July 15th, that's as high as they could go. So if they were to say to us, we're going to stay revenue neutral, that means they're staying revenue neutral. They cannot in August say, oh, you know what, this broke down, so we're going to add to it. You can't do that. All of this kind of changes the way budgets are done at governing levels because it moves that calendar up. So when the assessed value comes out, there was usually more time to kind of figure out your budget. Locking you in July, one of the things, and she mentioned, people from Baldwin are there. It's going to be really important for us to communicate to the taxing subdivisions about this. Because the law is very specific that says that if they go over it, we have to refund the money collected and the entity has to pay it back. And then everything will be certified to us by September 20th. So for the notices for the first 2 years of the notices, we can apply to the state to pay us back for the notices. Because I can tell you with elections, when you say mailing to every tax, to every voter, that's tens of thousands of dollars. So for the first 2 years, we can apply to the state and the state will reimburse us. After that, each taxing subdivision will fund that notice based off their proportion. The valuation of real property, and this kind of goes into Steve's area, that is a result of normal repair, replacement, and maintenance does not increase the value of that property. So I mentioned there that, prior to this, the deadline to do certification of taxes was October 1st. And moving into September 20th doesn't sound like much for a lot of entities, but it really is. Another part of that law is that the county treasurer can accept partial payments both for delinquent or non-delinquent real or personal property, which is a change because of the non-delinquent. So there can be a payment plan that is set up. This, Sarah, did that kind of explain it?
Yes, and I appreciate that, Jamie. And I think like some of the points that we want to make sure the commission understands is that, previously units of government used to receive their appraised value information, Jamie, mid-June, June 10th. It was pretty much
right.
You had until August 24th, in essence, or the third Thursday in August to prepare your budget. Well, now from June to July 15th, you need to tell the county clerk your maximum mill levy, and you need to tell him when you're gonna have a public hearing on that budget. That has compressed that time frame substantially. In my view, as a person who's done, public sector budgets for a very long time now, my direction to the commission is going to be talking about aiming high on the mill levy because you have not completed the budget process yet. So you want to give yourself room to really continue your budget process before you have that hearing. Some places don't feel that way, that perhaps they would want to send a letter to every parcel in Douglas County, which is over 42,000 parcels, telling them that how much they're going to raise their taxes by if they're not certain that that's the amount they're going to raise the taxes by. So I do think this is a huge, the notification requirements are pretty substantial. This is in essence producing a tax bill in the middle of the year without the precision of a tax bill. And tax bill production in this building is a lot of work. And Jamie was, I think, pretty nice, but our system currently doesn't, obviously doesn't prepare a report like this. That's something we can work on over the next year. It will require substantial investment on the time of our entire land records and taxation team to work on that. Something else I wanted to point out was Douglas County as an organization has traditionally helped townships and districts in preparing their state budget forms. We were able to manage that workload by doing it after the county budget was in essence put together. So, the county budget's developed in June and then it's brought to the commissioners in early July. And normally by early to mid-July, we have an estimated mill levy and we can prepare for a budget hearing in August. Now what will happen is, and then in that time frame, that gap between mid-July and early August, my staff then worked with townships and districts to help them prepare their state budget forms. Now, all of that work has to be done at the same time we're preparing county budget forms. And I think as most folks even on this call will know that we've got a pretty limited budget staff in terms of our ability to provide that assistance. So one of the things I am looking at related to this is it possible for us to secure some contract support to help townships and districts to complete their forms properly, and to also just even be able to decide if they want to stay revenue neutral and what that would look like, because my staff will be still involved in the county budget process. I would plan to bring that consideration back to the commission if that is something we can even contract out, or is the cost so prohibitive that we would need to add staff? I think Jamie is going to be evaluating that too, in terms of what that workload is like. And really, the workload on the clerk's piece, you know, we both have pieces that will go up this year in terms of simply gathering this data and providing the notice to the public, working with townships and districts to prepare that information earlier. And then an additional workload will come on the organization in 2022, preparing for the 2023 budget when those notifications are mailed out. So we really wanted to get this to commissioners as soon as possible, knowing that the governor was going to sign it and we would begin to get questions from districts as to how to approach it. I do think, Jamie, I think our team talked about perhaps we could prepare some informational Zoom type sessions in the pretty near future with townships and districts and municipalities to share with them the facts of what's going to be required and prepare for this process this year.
And one of the things that there are some things there are not answers to at the moment. One of those is most people don't realize there's kind of a domino effect of setting values and so forth with all these shared districts across county lines. And so we always already struggle to kind of meet deadlines if a county is behind, because then it puts us behind, then it puts the county that's waiting on us behind. So part of the question we have to the state is, how does that impact those couple weeks that from when we get the assessed value to when we set what this revenue neutral rate is? That is, you know, Sarah will tell you that's hoping that everything's on time, and that includes the state assessed gets to us on time. So the timeline is really tight on this as we kind of work through how it would work.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I really appreciate the kind of overview and the walkthrough of the process, the timeline, and how this would all work. I have kind of a couple comments and a question. First of all, I do really appreciate the amount of support that the county provides for townships and smaller municipalities when it comes to budgets. So I do look forward to seeing kind of what the increased workload and truncated timelines mean for how we might be able to provide that support and what kind of resources we would need from the county to continue to provide that support. I think that makes us a stronger community overall, though I recognize that those are real material resources that the county is putting up to support our townships and smaller municipalities, and we need to recognize that and be able to budget for that from the county perspective. I guess my question is around the revenue neutral piece. Is there any discussion in the legislation around inflation, or does revenue neutral take into account inflation? We know that from our budgets, there are some costs that continue to go up because costs of living go up, insurance premiums go up. Is there any sort of inflation or cost of living increase accounted for in the discussion of revenue neutral?
No, in fact, that second paragraph is almost line for line of what it says in the legislation. The legislation is very simple about how you calculate that, and it is purely current year's assessed valuation, whatever last year's revenue was, and that gives you a mill, and that's what revenue neutral is. So it does not take into consideration any of those factors.
When we do get to the point of providing notice, I guess, whether it's through the website this year or mail next year, it does sound like this is really attempting to provide some business to the post office throughout our state. So I guess we should appreciate the legislature for that. But when we do provide that notice, is it possible for us to include additional educational information for constituents kind of around what is the inflation rate? What would revenue neutral look like in dollars? last year's dollars, this year's dollars? What does that kind of look like overall? Or do we have to stick exclusively to the information that's outlined in the legislation?
Well, the first part that I don't know if it's in here that I kind of missed. Citizens can opt to receive it by email. So they can opt to do, we don't, that's one thing we talked to IT is we would have to come up with a way for them to opt in and then for us to handle those email addresses. So there is a provision for electronic communication. You know, I can leave it to Sarah. You know, I believe you could probably add anything within those notices that you could.
Yeah, I believe we could add additional information to it, but remember, commissioners, you're talking about one piece of paper, one mailing that's going to represent about, I don't know, Jamie, 4 or 5 different districts would be on an average tax bill. So I would want to be, I guess I don't want to, how do we have that reviewed by committee as to what's on the bill, or not on the bill, but on the notice? So I do think if there was some recommendations that we wanted to put forward, we certainly could, but you know, I do also worry about, we are representing information from other districts on this one single piece of paper or this one notice. And I would also, just to make sure folks are really clear here, we just had a conversation about how Douglas County is growing and how more and more people are coming and our assessed valuation is growing and growing and growing. Well, that means in all of these cases, you know, as your assessed valuation grows, if you're staying revenue neutral, this rolls back. So, I mean, really, it's talking about if you receive $1 more than the previous year, you are required to comply with this notice.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll open it up for additional questions from commissioners, and then I do see that we have public comment for this item as well. Commissioners, any additional questions before we go to public comment?
I don't have any more questions.
Okay. Jill mentioned in the chat that Clint Hornberger is here online for public comment. Jill, would you please move Clint to panelists so that they can make their public comment?
Clint, you should be able to talk.
Clint, you're going to need to.
Hey, there we go. Okay. I think we're good.
We are. Please go ahead.
Okay. I didn't really have a comment one way or the other on this. I did have a question. Clint Hornberger on the Willow Springs Township Board, and was listening to some of the other stuff earlier, and so I just hung on to see how this might affect us. When Jamie, when you spoke about entities not being able to, I guess, violate this or go over, does that also include amended budgets? So in other words, does it affect our spending authority or budget authority versus assessed or mill levy?
Yeah, that's a really good question, which we don't have an answer for at this moment. I know that's something the clerks have already asked the state to kind of tell us about, because this really doesn't mention amended budgets. So you're right. You're right that that is something that I think needs to be addressed, because that does happen.
Yeah, I think I don't need to go into the concerns with that with you all. I think you all fully understand how not only trying to set a budget in a short window and with little information is difficult, but if you're trying to set a budget that you cannot then amend later, that would be bad. So that's all I had. I just had a quick question. So
Thank you, Clint.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, do we have anyone in the courthouse for public comment on this item?
We do not.
Jill, do we have anyone else online for public comment for this item?
No.
Okay, we'll bring it back to commissioners for discussion. Commissioners, do we have any further discussion of this item?
Not for me. Thanks for the presentation, Jamie.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Kelly. Thank you very much for the presentation, Jamie. And thank you, Jamie and Sarah, for working through SB 13 for us. I know that it does cause a lot of changes and a lot of truncated timelines. So please let us know how we can support you in moving all of this forward.
Thank you, commissioners.
And we will move to item 4.4, recent state legislative change regarding public health organizations. Sarah, I believe that we have a presentation for this as well.
Thank you, commissioners. County Counsel John Bullock and Assistant County Councilor Brad Finkeldye are moving into the panel to update the commission on another state legislative change related to, I believe, Senate Bill 40, which was the Kansas Emergency Management Act. And really, this is also just an item for commissioner education at this point in time for tonight, and then there potential future action. John, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, commissioners. I'll just hit the highlights and then take any questions that you may have. The new legislation provides that if a local health officer determines that it is necessary to issue an order that would mandate the wearing of face masks, limiting the size of gatherings of individuals, curtailing the operation of businesses, controlling the movement of the population, or limiting religious gatherings, the local health officer is required to propose that order to you as the Board of County Commissioners. At your next regularly scheduled meeting, you must review that proposed order, and you can take any action related to the order that you believe is necessary. If there's an emergency situation, the chair or vice chair of the board can review the order, but ordinarily it would come before the full board. If the board approves the order, it will become effective. Again, you can take whatever action you want. That could include rejecting the proposed order or modifying. If there's an order that's been proposed or issued by the health officer with the approval of this body, any party that is quote unquote aggrieved or otherwise affected, I would say, by this order can bring a court challenge. And there are some procedural provisions related to how that all happens. It can happen very quickly if it needs to happen. The upshot is that the court will review the order to see if the health order is narrowly tailored to the purpose stated in the order and uses the least restrictive means to achieve such purpose. And that's comes from a legal standard, strict scrutiny, which is used in other cases where the government is acting and traditionally in areas of fundamental rights. Here, the legislature's adopted that same rubric for the review of these health orders. Another way to think about that might just be, does the order do the minimum that is necessary or more than the minimum that is necessary to achieve the stated purpose of the order? That's the new legislation. Right now, we have a health order that's been issued by the local health officer, Dr. Thomas Marcelino. That order remains in effect. In other words, it was not repealed by the effect of the legislature enacting this new law. However, at some point, and I understand that administration believes that the health officer may be back in front of you or be in front of you next week to present a new health order. At that point, then you'll have an opportunity to review that, have a hearing on that, and take whatever action you deem appropriate, then again, subject to whatever judicial review may ensue after that. So those are the high points. I would anticipate if the health officer does indeed come back to you with a proposed order, Brad and I could meet with you in executive session to discuss the legal advice we might give you pertaining to the statute and your role. Then if you were going to take any action on that item, that would need to be an open session, and you would presumably want to hear evidence from Dr. Marcelino. He's also in consultation routinely with Dr. Scrimshire, who's an infectious disease specialist, other specialists, and as well as the health department. So that's really my summary. I'd be happy to take any questions. As you know, Brad, who has many other jobs, is also primarily our counsel to the health department. So Brad knows some things that relate specifically to the current health order if you had questions about that. And again, either of us would be happy to field any questions you may have.
This is Commissioner Portillo. Thank you very much for the overview. I'll open it up to questions from commissioners.
Maybe while commissioners are thinking of their thoughts, I would just interject one thing. I need to check with the health officer and public health staff on the timing of if they're looking to revise the order and when that would be ready to come back before the commission. I think initially our thought was that it would be ready pretty soon. However, I think it is important that perhaps the commission meet with their counsel about this executive session in advance of that order, just so the commission is aware of the obligations. So depending on the timing of that, I just would want to make sure we have that opportunity for you all to ask those questions before we do the order.
Yeah, and I'll just add that we're obviously happy to do that, as you all know, and I'll just say so that all the members of the public know, the purpose of executive session is just to consult with us about very strictly legal matters. Any discussion you would have regarding the necessity for a health order, what the health order should say, what the evidence shows, all of that would occur in public session. You would not take any action in private session with us. We would just be giving you our legal advice, which is privileged. Then you would come back into open session to do all of your business.
This is Commissioner Kelly. So Sarah, seems like I've heard that some counties went right to a new health order. Do you have any sense from other counties? I'm just curious how counties are reacting to this. Do you have any sense of that? And no.
Well, I can tell you what I know, and obviously, Brad or John, jump in if there's something What I would say is I think it's all over the board. I think there are some counties that are waiting to see, the governor is planning to initiate new orders, and then my understanding is that would be reviewed by the Legislative Coordinating Council. So I think there are some folks waiting to see what would happen there. I think there are some counties that have preemptively said they're not interested. Some of them are looking to create guidelines instead of orders, which is definitely something that can be considered and available for recommendations. So I think I will tell you, I think there's a lot of people trying to figure out what the next steps are at the same time. I don't know, Brad, if you know more about that than that.
No, the only one I would add, just to say there's a myriad, is Shawnee County left their order in place, but said anyone can opt out of it. So slightly stronger than a recommendation, but less than an order.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Reed here. I don't have any questions. I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate the correspondence we got to really help understand what this issue is and know what to expect next. So thanks for keeping us informed in a timely manner.
And if there are no more questions from commissioners, we will open this up for public comment. Sarah, I'm going to assume that there's no one in the courthouse with you because you have no mask on.
Yes,
Jill, is there anyone online?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, John and Brad. We really appreciate it. And as Commissioner Reed mentioned, really appreciate all of the timely communication with the commission. And I'm sure we will continue to talk about this. Thanks. Okay, we will move to appointments. Sarah, do we have any appointments to consider this week?
Commissioners, the only thing, and I do apologize for its late notice, I did send you some additional follow-up information from the Food Policy Council, just in relationship to some of the questions you had last week on terms. So that's the only piece of information I have to bring forward.
I will admit I have not had a chance to read through that string of emails. Additional background on that. If other commissioners kind of want to move anything forward, certainly open to hearing about it. Otherwise, we might leave that to next week. Commissioner Kelly?
I'm fine leaving it to next week. I did have a conversation with Tyler Lindquist, who's the chair of the Food Policy Council, and after commissioners have some more time to read through that, I can just share that out next week, that conversation. It was helpful for me, so I'm happy to wait a week.
Same here.
Thank you both for that grace of a week, and we will get to that one next week. So we will move on to miscellaneous. Sarah.
Commissioners, included in your packet is just a very brief memo from me this week related to the legislative update, and which is in there, and that's all I really have tonight.
This is Commissioner Reed here. To bounce back to appointments real quick, I did want to ask Sarah, with the Planning Commission appointment that opens up in May, do we know yet whether or not anybody has expressed particular interest, or if there's any other like recommendations? I just know, I feel like May is going to sneak up on us, and that's a big role to fill. And so just trying to think through anybody who we might want to think about having some conversations with.
Let me follow up with Tanya Voigt. I know she was looking at some folks, and I don't know that we've had anyone particularly put their name forward yet. Obviously, if you know folks that might be interested, obviously we're still in the process of evaluating that. But let me talk to Tanya and get back to you next week.
Great, thank you.
Sarah, this is Commissioner Kelly. I just bringing this up. We've talked about this as a commission before, when sort of a list of our advisory boards and a way to submit your name. I know we've been dealing with a pandemic and we've created an awesome coronavirus hub. I don't know. I'm just sort of bringing that back to the table. I know it's been a lot, so.
I appreciate that, commissioners. This is a topic that Robin and I have talked about. I would just say that all of our boards are on our website. And so for folks that want information about our current boards and commissions, it does need to be updated. We're going to try to see if we can at least get it cleaned up. The process of sort of soliciting nominations for that process, really, we wanted to tie it into the implementation of our iCompass solution, which manages boards and commissions, and that really has been delayed. The way the project plan worked out, it was supposed to work on publishing the audio of your meetings first and then do boards and commissions. So we have not been able to reorder that process. But I also know too that in conversations with Commissioner Portillo, that this was a particular interest of the intern she has working for her this year. And so we were going to hopefully see if what we could gather out of that process, and then hopefully that be able to move us forward. So I do apologize. It's been a delay on this process, and but it is definitely on our radar.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I really appreciate the question, Commissioner Kelly, and appreciate the follow-up, Sarah, and also very much recognize that we are in a pandemic and people have been stretched very thin with regard to lots of things to respond to very quickly all the time.
And I appreciate that, but this is something we want to get done. So we're going to continue to rededicate our efforts on seeing what we can do here. I would also notice too, I don't know that I've mentioned this specifically to the commission, and some of our forward planning for the rest of 2021. I'm going to have some pretty key retirements in our IT division in 2021, to the point that there's significant retirements in that department. We are in the middle of a new tax system implementation that you're going to hear about more in a couple weeks. Our focus and priority is getting the tax system completed because the timelines for that are so very tight, to make sure that happens. So I'm trying to ascertain from that staff what we can get done in 2021 in terms of supporting that. I believe our webmaster is retiring, and a lot of other additional folks. So the labor market is really tight. We're currently advertising for those positions, and it's been extremely difficult. So I'll just offer that up to as well.
This is Commissioner Portillo. Local government IT is always a hard position to fill, and we know that the IT market in our region is very intense right now. It's hard to keep our students at the KU Edwards campus in the IT program all the way to graduation because they're getting scooped up. So I hope that we get some good candidates and advertise those positions broadly. I did notice on the memo, Sarah, that you mentioned the legislative update from Local Government Relations. I saw the Watkins memo. I didn't see the legislative update memo.
I apologize. I'll make sure Robin gets both of those pieces added to the packet and we get it updated, and we'll send it to you directly, commissioners.
Thank you. Appreciate that. One piece of miscellaneous that I am really excited about, I appreciated all of the discussion and the really great public feedback around our public defender discussion last week in our work session. And I have been working with Mike Bauer. We are going to move forward with developing a indigent defense work group for Douglas County. And so the indigent defense work group will bring members of judges from our district court, as well as some expertise around indigent defense in our community to kind of discuss next steps and keep those conversations going. So we have our first meeting, I believe, in a couple of weeks, April 16th. I'm really excited to get that work group kind of going and report back to the commission as we continue our work and keep moving forward and how we think about indigent defense here in Douglas County.
As we get ready to launch that work group, we will report back to the whole body. I want to make sure you guys have all those data points that was asked for at the last meeting. So we'll prepare that in a document, as well as who's going to be working on this work group with us, and make sure the full commission has that information.
Do we have other miscellaneous items? Please go ahead.
Commissioner Portillo, I just wanted to ask a follow-up question about that. And will that be a work group through CJCC? Is that an additional work group through that, or are we thinking of it separately? I'm just wondering if there's overlap there.
That's a great question, Commissioner Reed. Since Mike is organizing it, he's our CJCC coordinator, I think it could be seen as an additional work group through CJCC, though I would argue that this has kind of already moved from CJCC to the county commission. And so this is really a work group kind of the county. But I don't know if there is a specific difference, because we really don't have any specific guidelines around work groups.
Yeah.
Sarah?
Yeah, if I could chime in a little bit, I would, all of the work groups of the CJCC are ongoing and, permanent work groups. I do envision that this might not be as longer term in nature. I believe the bylaws do talk, so I would say this is not directly a CJCC request for a work group, and really this is a recommendation based out of that work session to have some additional help work on this, or some additional assistance in working on a proposal around public defense and bringing it back before the commission. Obviously, multiple members of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council will be engaged in that work, and we will certainly keep them updated as to the progress. But welcome to the overlapping circles that is coordination in councils and county government.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you both for, I just kind of thinking through, I think for a lot of people, the conversation about indigent defense, kind of some people's awareness around it started with Heather Cessna's and BID's presentation to CJCC, and there's been conversations there. So I appreciate you making that distinction. It makes sense that this is a really, that it has already come to the county commission, and it's a really targeted, kind of tangible work group to move forward with. It's not necessarily permanent. So thanks for that. And thank you, Commissioner Portillo, for helping convene folks to really continue that conversation and bring back more, more concrete information to us in the future.
This is Commissioner Kelly. It just, I assumed it was part of the CJCC. So now I'm sort of, do we have any other work groups that we've put together, Sarah, based on study sessions that are reporting back to the county commission?
Well, yeah, I don't know, Commissioner Kelly, if we have any currently, but I'm certainly, we've referred items from work sessions to further study with staff, engagement with other folks. So, you know, I don't feel like this is unprecedented necessarily in terms of developing, you know, additional feedback. Not everything can be managed at the commission level in terms of developing that work, but, you know, I'm certainly, you know, if there's, so
Just was interested, just was wondering if there were other work groups out there working that we didn't know about. So I was just trying to figure out, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I would say that even like our work with the Humane Society on the new animal code and putting
Okay, that's a
that
good example. Yeah, that'd be a good example. Okay, great.
I would say that this is Commissioner Portillo, an even more timely example is our noxious weed plan. Because that didn't come out of a work session, but it came out of an agenda item and now has resulted in increased work with staff and then an ongoing kind of gathering throughout the year to have a new plan by 2022. A very important clarification question, because I think it is, we use these words in lots of spaces and they can mean different things at different times.
Well, I don't have anything else miscellaneous for us this evening.
Neither do I.
Well, thank you all. I don't have anything else either, so I would say that we're adjourned at this point.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.